this is Christina Bart. You're watching Black Tea News. Hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we're going to be talking about Trump's interview that he had with Meet the Press. And it's been all the rage on social media, especially if you're on like political social media. And he has upset many pro-lifers, and I am one of them, though there are pro-Trump people who are really twisting themselves to justify a position he had. And some people are like, it's a practical approach. And I'm going to walk you guys through it, or not really walk it through. We're going to watch that section. Not just the clip of what he said. That's, they're like a minute into some change clip that's going around on Twitter. Because some people are like, oh, you cut it off, etc. So we're going to watch that whole exchange and talk about what it means going forward. And is he going with a smart political tactic? Is it a incremental approach to pro-life legislation, or is it just radically just not pro-life? Also, it's a rough sort of weekend. I hope you guys had a nice weekend, though. Outside of politics, it was a good weekend. I went to church. I feel I think you guys can maybe still hear a little bit of congestion in my nose, but it's basically gone. Thank you for your well wishes of me getting better and stuff. So, overall good weekend. But this is this news about Trump, and then Lauren Boebart. We'll be talking about that too, and her behavior, what had Beetlejuice, and then I guess what's really upset me is a lot of reaction to these things from right wing pundits and influencers, and I question. I don't like to speculate people being grifters. People will sometimes throw that around at me, and I'm just like, bro, I believe all these things that I'm saying, that I'm putting out there. It's some people believe and practice what they preach, but I see so many kind of inconsistencies that really bother me, and I'm concerned about where we're going and what's our movement, and who are these people leading it. So I've got a lot of thoughts today, a lot of ground to cover. We're not going to talk about a ton of different stories, but I think the core message of what we'll be talking about is pretty important. So before we jump to everything, I want to encourage you guys, go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, different articles, different videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com/donate. Costs to stream, it costs to run my website, all that stuff. So if you guys would like to support in that way, you guys can. I'm still I guess it's not terrible, but last week my webcam pooped out on me, so I'm using like the one straight from like the laptop, as opposed to I had a Logitech one before, but it just pooped out. So just another thing on the list of things that to be covered and replaced and stuff. So if you guys want to help out in any kind of way, you guys can go to blacktnews.com again and support Bible Study. Have not because you ask not. So I am asking. There's a link in the description if you would like to participate that way. You could also give via stars on Facebook, or you guys can also do super chats if you're on YouTube. Thank you to everyone who watches live, and thank you to those who watch it back. I see you guys are quiet in the chat today, but I thank you guys for some of you watch every day, comment every day. I know not all of you can watch live every day, because some of you are working, so you come home on your drive home, you'll watch later. So I thank you very much for your dedication. As I'm dedicated to just trying to give my honest opinion and cover some topics and on the news and culture and all sorts of things, and hopefully move this country and this world in a better direction, and do my small part. But I feel kind of lonely right now, especially looking at some influencers and how, I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of people who I'm just questioning right now. So I don't have anything funny for you guys before we jump in. So I'm just gonna hop to it. First thing, and this didn't happen over the weekend, but it was close to it, and I didn't mention it because we had other stories that we were covering. You may have heard Governor Kristi Noem that she was accused of having an affair with Corey Lewandowski. Um, and there was a story by the Daily Mail, and the New York Post also did a follow-up story with different sources. And some people are like, "Oh, these are unnamed sources. This seems not true." And um a lot of people in the know are like, "This is not a well-kept secret." And I've got to say that I heard about it some time ago. Um Maybe a full year ago. So um it's that doesn't mean, if you go through the article, they talk about different places where they were seen together, and um that they're pretty cozy. I just listened to Ben's show. He says he knows people who are like, no, they're pretty like openly like together in different places, and um pretty close. So Christy No, when she endorsed President Donald Trump at a rally about maybe 2 weeks ago, she had said that people would come out and attack her. And I'm assuming by the way she worded it, everything, that maybe, I mean, I don't know, maybe she knew that particular story was going to drop, but it is an allegation that she's denied before. So, but just because you deny something doesn't mean that it's obviously not true. But yeah, I'd err on the it's probably true side. Um, and it's just sad because it's, and not good because she's married and everything and has a family. And someone said that Corey Lewandowski was the Pete Davis of the Trump world. And that was pretty funny, and because I don't understand people's fascination with Pete Davis. And I don't get the Corey thing, but he's um with Hope Hicks too, so he gets around. And I guess I don't have much more to say than that. I didn't want to address it when I found out, because one, I guess from just sources where I heard it from. And some people are speculating like, oh, it's the pro DeSantis people who are spreading these rumors, or oh, it's the left that's spreading these rumors. Um Sources are, well, again, it seems to not be a well kept secret, but also there's people within MAGA world who are sharing the stuff. That's where I heard it from. So something that Matt Gaetz told me about 2 years ago, I met him in Mackinac Island. He said that how Trump manages is pretty fascinating. And basically, it's like dog eat dog, and people are willing to betray each other to get ahead. And he likes that attention, I guess, and dedication from people within his circle that are willing to, I don't know, stab their competitor in the back. You know, I guess it makes good reality TV. Um, I don't, I, in the, he's run a businesses for a long time, so I guess it's worked out for him to some degree. But that might explain some, stuff in the White House. But so if there's other people who had someone else in mind for, I don't know, vice president, and she's kind of getting close, it wouldn't surprise me if people just started sharing information to kind of try to embarrass her or whatever. So I guess I don't have much more to say about it than that, because it is, like I said, I would err on the side of it probably being true, but it's still, the stories that came out, I didn't have them like, I don't know, together making out, or it didn't have pictures like that. It was just they were here together here. This eyewitness said that they were making out here, and this person said this, and this person said this. So I don't fault anyone for not taking it as the gospel, and other than if it's true, it being sad. I guess I don't have much more to say about it than that. However, the Lauren Boebart story. Um, you may have heard that she got ejected from like a Beetlejuice performance, and that there was rumors or whatever that she was vaping and she was loud and she was singing along to music and all kinds of different stuff. And turns out some video footage was released, and her boyfriend, who's a Democrat who owns a bar, gay friendly bar, I guess, but not gay friendly bar, I mean like a drag friendly bar. That's a side note, but um, they went to the performance together, and I watched security footage, and she's really obviously, besides a clip where there's sexual stuff going on, like just her being in the audience and her moving around and obviously talking compared to everyone else trying to enjoy the show was pretty annoying. I mean, she's doing like can't shoot it, taking pictures with the flash, which you're not supposed to do in a theater performance, because you could easily distract the people on stage. You're not supposed to do that. um and was pretty obnoxious and stuff, including to like a pregnant person who was a pregnant woman behind her. But the clip that's been getting all the chatter is of her boyfriend just feeling all up on her, and I mean feeling. um and she, has her hands in interesting places as well. And I you guys can easily find it if you go on Twitter. If you haven't seen it, you can easily find it somewhere. um I didn't really want to show it on the show. I kind of regret that I retweeted it. I retweeted it and said it was trashy. um but I guess I kind of regret retweeting it, just because I don't want to really elevate it and spread it around. um but I didn't delete it because the conversation, the replies that someone had to me was so crazy. I'm like, I don't really want to delete it, because again, I retweeted it and I said it was trashy. That's no way to behave in a theater. And I don't know. I didn't see any kids like around in that area, but I'm sure there could have been some kids there seeing Beetlejuice. And if I was in the theater, and you guys can call me a prude and a stick in the mud if you want, I would have gotten her kicked out for sure. And if I was there with my family, like if my dad was there or something, he would have definitely disrupted the show. Oh my gosh, he would have told them off. One time my family, I don't remember how many of my siblings were in the car, but I was in the car and my sister Angelina was in the car, and we were at the post office, and there was like two people making out, and one girl was like, the girl was like in the guy's lap and stuff, so they were really going in it. So my dad just pop 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 banged on their windows. And my sister Angelina was talking about the other day, she thought he was going to break the glass. How hard he was banging. And he said, I got kids in the car. And granted, we were all his kids, maybe only two of us were minors, but he did not appreciate that. So if he was in the theater, oh my gosh, and saw them, whatever, he would have gone off. That would have been a distraction for sure. Much more than flash photography. And so yeah, I would have not been cool with what was going on. Now some people are like, oh, you guys are prudes, and Well, let me just, I guess, first go to the comment after I tweeted out that it was trashy, and someone replied to me. Well, someone said not as trashy as drag shows. Um, and people had deflection sort of comments everywhere, just deflection after deflection after deflection. Um, and people brought up Susan Gibson, who's we covered it on the show last week. She's running in Virginia. Her and her husband were doing like streaming to have they had like 5,000 followers, and they were like suggesting like like, hey, do this, send us money and we'll do this and other stuff like that. So yeah, I didn't like that too. I don't think that person is worthy of the office. um that still has nothing to do with Lauren. I'm sorry. And so it was just again deflection after deflection after deflection. Someone sent me a screenshot of the video of the candidate, Virginia Democrat candidate. They have her butt, blocked by her profile picture or whatever, so I don't see her crack in the picture. But I'm just like, her them doing this thing doesn't erase Lauren doing that thing. I'm like, well, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just thinking like, why send me this like pornographic picture? Why? Just because I made a comment that what Lauren did was trashy. Why? Why? And this person is a follower of mine. So I'm like, and I don't know how deeply they follow me, but I'm just like, I'm I'm not a lefty who supports like all this other kind of stuff. And then they're like, but here's this. You guys support this. So how dare you? You're a hypocrite. Like, no, that's not the case with me. That's not the case with me. So someone told me bleep off. They are two adults and it's a dark theater doing nothing normal, healthy teenagers wouldn't be at. Get a bleeping life, you hypocrite. And by the way, let me finish the tweet and I'll tell you their handle. Let me guess. You probably support child grooming, porn in schools, trans cult, child mutilation, and abortion to 40 weeks. And you're okay with traitors and corrupt criminals in office as long as it's a demon rat. Did I nail it? No, you did nail it. And this person's handle is core values win. Core values win. After you cursed me out, that's your handle. You felt compelled to do that because I said that two adults, where she's filling up on his stuff and he's filling all up on her titties, is trashy. And they tell me to bleep off and accuse me of supporting drag shows and inappropriate books and all that stuff. And I'm like, dude, I am a conservative. I'm a Christian who preaches to be celibate until marriage. And if I saw anything like that in public, I told her I would kicked him out or whatever. And but I'm a Christian conservative, as Lauren alleges to also be. She also alleges to be this thing. So people have been certainly, especially on the left, posting screenshots of her saying, take your kids to church, not drag shows. Tweets about how the people, when times are tough, they drive her to her knees, which people made nasty jokes when she first tweeted that. But people are like, oh, this aged badly. Or maybe well, from that whatever perspective. So yeah, I understand there's people on the left who are like, oh, you guys are the family values party, yet you're up here doing this, but you're saying, hey, drag queens or whatever shouldn't be doing these kinds of things in public in front of kids, but you're out here in a public place doing this. If you want to say, oh, those people, you guys are, in glass houses throwing stones, that's whatever. I get that. Like, you don't want to be lectured by immoral people. However, just because someone else may have poor moral standards, them pointing at you and saying, hey, you are not living up to your own, is not a bad thing. it might be politically advantageous, but the fact that these people are criticizing you doesn't erase that there's people on the right who are trying to be morally consistent who are criticizing you. So and I don't have a lot of engagement on Twitter. It's probably my least like followed social media thing. So you know, I didn't get many more comments than that, I guess. I mean, besides like when I would go and engage on other people's pages. Um but I'm but I was reading like different replies to different people if they have an issue with what happened, and they just play these whataboutism games. And like to say, well, the teenagers, nothing but teenagers do this stuff in the dark. She's not a teenager. She's a grown woman. And not only she's not, is she a grown woman? She's a grown woman who's in Congress. As a matter of fact, when they were like the security and people were like bothering her because of what she was doing, she's like, "Do you know who I am?" So she played that card. She played that card. Now, do I think that she should like resign over this? No, nothing like that. Do I think she probably shouldn't run again? I don't think she should, because mostly because of this. Because she barely won re-election. In the midterms, people were like, "Oh my gosh, I think Lauren's about to lose her seat." It was like a nail biter whether or not she was going to keep that seat. It was a very close race. A very close race. So those Democrats are probably going to pour a lot of time and money into her competitor running against her again. And there's a good chance she's running again. She may lose that seat, but people want to stand up for Lauren because they say, well, she's a fighter. She's a fighter. She's a fighter. Oh, okay. But what happens when it's just fine if she goes down swinging? And what are we standing for, guys? What are we standing? Like, I understand that so many people use I'm a Christian conservative as a brand. And it would be fine if there are people out there who just want to support Lauren and say this that's in poor taste, but let's give her a little grace. Let's give her some grace. She's going through a divorce. You know, I this isn't good behavior, but let's give her some grace. And that's a good response. It's a fine response. Perhaps a more PC response than what you're saying, just leaving it she's trashy. But but that's not what I see a lot of people doing. They're just like, I stand by, you know, Lauren, and you guys are hypocrites, and you guys are prudes, and yes, a lot of people on the right are prudes, like especially if you say you're a Christian conservative. And I'm really baffled by people like um Jack Posobiec. He was one person who kept like um deflecting or saying I don't want to be lectured by these Dems, and who do X, Y, and Z. Just kept like whataboutism was the game. And I get it, like Democrats don't spend a lot of time apologizing for their people. No, people on the right feel a lot of times that they don't need to apologize for their people. But I'm just thinking about a couple of, was it maybe a month ago or so, Nancy Mace was at a prayer breakfast, and I don't know if we talked about it. I certainly wrote an article about it though. But Nancy Mace was at a prayer breakfast for Tim Scott, and she made a joke. And I don't know if this was a joke, but she told it like it was supposed to be humorous. And she was like, "Yeah, I woke up this morning. My fiance like grabbed my waist and tried to pull me back in the bed. And it's just like, no, baby, I got to get to the prayer breakfast. I got to get to the prayer breakfast." And so a lot of people had a lot of things to say, and Jack was one of them. And I'm not saying those two are the same thing, but I'm just like, why it I mean, it's bad in the case of Nancy. One, you're fornicating. It's your fiance. That's not your husband. You should probably talk to your pastor about that. Two, that's not an appropriate joke at a prayer breakfast. And it's kind of concerning that you don't know that. So there's that. And So there's like a moral kind of issue there theologically, and there's also the issue of like that's a really like crazy thing to do. And she wrote like did all this kinds of tweets and other kind of stuff about it, but Jack was like one of the people who like elevated the story. That's how I found about it. His tweet. So I'm just like, if there's, if we're pointing to this person and being like, that's not great. We can't at least say like, hey, this other person who's supposed to be a Christian conservative should at least not be getting hands and touchy feely in a theater performance of Beetlejuice. I don't want to drag her forever, but if you go around talking about like you're a family values kind of person, and you know you have outbursts like that in public, like, and it's already a tight re-election that you had, I would consider what might be best going forward for the party, and I think it would be if someone else ran in that seat. I don't think Lauren's the way, bruh. I don't think Lauren is the way. And again, I don't think what she did is worth her resigning or anything like that. That she violated her office or anything like that. It's more like a optics sort of thing, and calling into question the sort of values that she has tried to stand on. Especially if we're talking about different behaviors, sexual behaviors that you have in public. So she looks bad on this issue. But I'm more upset about people's reaction and defense of her than I am about what actually happened. Like I would have again, I am not cool with what happened, and I definitely, I definitely would have got her kicked out the theater. Again, you can think I'm a prude and I'm definitely a prude and a snitch. Guilty. I'm so guilty of those things. Um, but again, people's reaction to this has been really disturbing. And there was like a tweet from Matt Gaetz who said something about in defense of Gnome, in defense of Lauren. I want to find it really quick. And then under it, Jenner was the person who oh gosh. Yeah, so Matt Gaetz said, "I stand with Governor Kristi Noem and Lauren Boebart. They fight for the people and face relentless attacks from the media and the left because they are effective. I remain honored to work with both to advance the American fight against America First agenda." And then Caitlyn Jenner is like, "Amen," and I'm just like, that kind of I know sums the state of things up a bit, I guess. So you know. Kind of sums things up a bit. Anyway, I'm not pleased with a lot of the shielding that people were doing. Well, that I guess the shielding is one thing, the deflection and the whataboutism and the you know you don't have to defend bad behavior just because it's someone on your side. You can question the timing of different things, and the timing isn't suspicious, at least not with the Lauren story, because it happened. It's not like it was some kind of unearthed thing that happened 20 years ago or something. Isn't it crazy that something like that could just derail a whole entire race? Like George W. Bush when he ran, um, like that what October surprise was that he, you know, used to drink and party. And so I remember when I asked my parents who did they vote for, my mom just turned around and threw her head back and she was like, "The drunk." I was just like, I don't, and I was a kid at the time, just like, I don't understand. I'm like, who are you talking about? She's like, "The drunk." She just kept saying it. And my dad was like, we voted for Bush. But sort of those sort of like moral qualm things that would pop up would totally derail things, and now it's just like a blip and shrug your shoulders. And I just think there's got to be better candidates out there. And I know people have always done like lewd things or cheated on their had affairs and all kinds of different stuff, or gone to wild parties, and some things slip up, and some things people just do behind the scenes and in the dark, and those things aren't good. But man, when you do things and you're just dumb, that's a whole nother thing, man. But I just would like a better quality field of people who just believe what they practice, what they preach, I guess. And people can fall, people can make mistakes. Again, we can have grace for people, but w- when you make excuses for people and then there's just no real accountability, then people don't take you seriously. And people are always begging. There's every like election, you'll have like some event where there's like, come to this group. We're trying to get all these evangelicals to engage. If only we could get all. There's so many Catholics. There's so many evangelicals who don't even vote. And if we could just get them to vote, it would dramatically change the election, and we'd win this and we'd win that. If only they would vote, because they would vote with their values, and they do blah blah blah, right? There's always a dinner. I don't know how many dinners you guys go to, but there's always something every election where they make a pitch and they're like, our group can do it. Our group can make a difference. We reach these people. What happens when evangelicals look at the field, maybe ones who need to be convinced or nudged a bit to vote to participate, and they see people like, nope, it's you guys are it's you guys are prude because people totally fill up each other at Beetlejuice, and they're kind of like, "That's your Christian conservative candidate." I think I'll keep sitting this out because you're both of the world, and I don't trust you. So, um, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Let's move on to the Donald Trump interview because we're going to be on it for a minute. So I'm gonna play this whole section where they talked about abortion. Hopefully, I don't get digged by NBC News as I play this. If anything happens while we're live, I guess that's a copyright thing, and just come back later. Um, so I don't want to play just the like a minute in a couple seconds of that's circulating because I want people to know what was the full conversation. I'm not gonna promise I'm not gonna talk through it. I'm pause it and stuff. But I spoiler alert, I'm not a fan of this conversation and what was said. And he's already said things in the past that I've been upset about, post presidency. I guess basically post midterm, where he's made a shift where the pro life issue to him seems to be a bit of a loser. So he still wants loyalty, but he's not particularly strong on this issue, and he seems like he thinks we're a drag. So and we can talk about whether that's correct or not and what should be our response. But let's go ahead and begin to watch this interview. We're just going to watch that section. They talked about this. It was over an hour long. So you can watch, I don't know what they all played on TV, but you guys can go watch the full unedited video on YouTube. So I recommend that you do that when you have some time. They did talk about a lot of different things, and like his cases, which I'm sure is going to be in the court case. I'm sure. But anyway, here we go. Let's watch this interview with Donald J. Trump.
To the war in Ukraine. But first, I do want to talk about the issue of abortion, which is important to a lot of voters all across the country. Just this week, women in Idaho and Tennessee, I don't know if you saw this, filed suit against their state saying their lives were put at risk after they were denied abortion services because their state's restrictive laws put in place after Roe was overturned. So, my question for you, Mr. President, is how is it acceptable in America that women's lives are at risk, doctors are being forced to turn away patients in need, or risk breaking the law?
Ready? A little bit of a long answer. I hope you.
I just want to already interject. There are all kinds of different cases that, and people get on TikTok and stuff, and they talk about them all the time. And you have to, I guess, basically go through each one. But um, there's cases where people should be suing hospitals for malpractice rather than trying to sue the state and get laws changed. Every state has exceptions for the life of the mother. Um, Many of them have exceptions for, like, bodily harm. People have exceptions for uh, fetal abnormality, all kinds of different things. It depends on the state, and people should know. They have different departments to help people understand and know those laws and stuff. So if it's a case where a doctor really doesn't act properly, that you should look into suing that hospital. But it would really help if some of these doctors who are obviously pro-choice, who are pretty much activists, if they would work with these pro-life groups to make sure that we have very broad laws that protect the unborn, but also the safety of the mother. Now, in my opinion, I think, again, states have life of the mother exceptions. I think it should just be in the best judgment of the physician, which many of the laws will say that. Um, and I don't think it's like last second, are you sure she's like convulsing and not going to make it? I don't think it should be that serious. I think if there's a, within good faith, there's a, risk, that you should go ahead and allowed to save, to preserve that mother's life. Now, I some people will say there should be no exceptions because there's never an instance where it's medically necessary to have an abortion. You can just induce the labor and all that stuff. And well, I personally, and ethic, like I think, especially if you want to keep the baby, I think in most circumstances people would try to monitor until the last minute, until some kind of situation arises. Um, and people say that um well, if someone's life is in danger, there is a triage situation where you're preserving or saving one life over another. In my book, I gave this kind of scenario where, because you would think that most people would, oh, put my child first, we got to save them. And I compared it to, like, if a mother and father, they have kids in the car and something happens, they get into a car accident and they're going over a cliff, and they of course are trying to save their kids and get the kids out of the car. Now, are you in a position where you can get all the kids out first and you can just, push them up and they'll get out safely before mom and dad get out? Or is there a situation where you have to get mom out to help the other kids get out? So these are really complex situations. And I think, realistically, you have to be able to say, within the doctor's, best good faith, judgment, medical emergency, that you have those exceptions. And by the way, again, every pro-life state, I mean, not every state has an exception, with the exception of states where they're allowed to abort up until, like, any point anyway, so they don't really need pro-life exceptions for life of the mother. So if there's any sort of medical situations where things are unclear, then I would like for these doctors who are very concerned about their patients to work with legislators and not just have this militant, we need to destroy the pro-life cause, and just make abortion available for everyone because we don't want these rare circumstances to happen. So we should try to enact laws that are going to maximize the most liberty for both patients. So someone today pushed back on something I said, and they're like, they had like three different, it was a little thread they had in a reply to me, and they ended up, the last comment that they said was like, my friend had somebody that I knew had a miscarriage, and they needed an abortion to be able to save their life. And I'm like, a miscarriage management is not the same as you having an induced abortion. And please feel free to cite a law in the United States, pro-life law, that says that you cannot remove a dead child from you because it's an abortion. Like that doesn't exist. That's not a thing. So it really kills me that people they say they're pro-choice and they're for abortion, but they have all these wacky ideas. They have all these imagine saying that you are pro lighting people on fire, pro arsonist lighting people on fire because you want to make sure that families have the right to cremate their loved ones. That's kind of what it's like. There's a big difference between a child in the womb tragically but living out the natural end of their life, even if they didn't get outside of the womb, that is the natural conclusion to their life, versus you deliberately going out of your way to make sure this child dies. That's a very big difference. So, but there are people who think that miscarriage management is an abortion. So they'll conflate those kinds of stories. By the way, if there's a complication in an abortion, that'll be mixed in sometimes with maternal mortality rate. So there's all kinds of misinformation that get people to these conclusions of why we need to just have abortion on demand, basically. So I said all that to say, and I'm sorry I interrupted for so long, but just kind of lost track, but of time, I suppose. You have to look at all these cases, and because there are cases where these women shouldn't be suing the state over these pro-life laws. They should be suing hospitals for the practices and not, acting according to how they should have acted. And but legally, politically, people have their games to try to sue these states to try to roll back, these laws and stuff. And emotionally, they want to create this moral panic and moral outrage to these laws. We really need strong leadership in this, not just in the pro-life community as far as activists, but also politically, people who will get in front of people in these interviews like this to be able to set the record straight. And I don't feel like Trump is really that guy on this issue, which is funny considering something he says at the end of this section, to be able to push back on a lot of this stuff. And they'll say like, oh, Democrats, they want to kill babies after they're born. No one believes that. So you got to try to break down, because these media people are totally on the side of expanding abortion. They're totally on the side of that, and they will do fact checks and different lies, really, to advance that agenda and to make people, on the right, who are not, you don't have to be on the right to be pro-life, to be pro-life people, to be the liars in this situation, when it's just not the case. There's so much misinformation going around. So I'm sorry for chatting so much, but I guess that's why you're here. But let's go on.
We have time.
I hope you have time. Okay. I'm here for as long as you have.
Roe v. Wade. For 52 years, people, including Democrats, wanted it to go back to states so that states could make the right. Roe v. Wade, I did something that nobody thought was possible, and Roe v. Wade was terminated, was put back to the states. Now, people, pro-lifers, have the right to negotiate for the first time. They had no rights at all, because the radical people on this are really the people, the Democrats, that say after 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, and even after birth, you're allowed to terminate the baby.
Democrats aren't saying that. I just have to. Democrats are not saying that.
Of course
That's
they do.
Not true.
You have a Virginia governor, previous governor, who said after the baby is born, you will make a determination, and if you want, you will kill that baby. The
Mr.
baby is
President,
now born.
Democrats writ large are not talking about that. Only 1% of late-term abortions happen, and always in the state of
They are
crisis.
the radical people, because nobody wants to see abortion.
Okay, so she's lying there. She's lying there. Maybe she doesn't know that she's lying. Maybe she's just like, this is the talking point we all have, and we just choose to believe this. It's not always in a state of crisis. Again, 1% of like, you're getting close to like 1 million abortions that's a lot. That's thousands. That's thousands, man. Depending on what you're considering late term or when you're starting to count it, it could be we're talking about 8,000 babies, 9,000 babies, 10,000 babies, 11,000 babies, 12,000 babies. It's a lot. And what we're talking about, babies who are close to consciousness or maybe can have consciousness and can feel pain or whatever. The guy I mentioned earlier who replied to me, he tried to say women do abort babies later, but they're no, he said women they'll abort prior to viability or whatever, without some kind of like medical issue or whatever. I'm just like, dude, go read the profile on Dr. Warren Hearn and his abortion clinic. They say there's women who come there with sob stories, and I don't say sob stories to be disrespectful, but like you know what I mean, like really grueling sympathetic stories. And I may not agree to all the conclusions, but it's understandable, more on the reasonable kind of side, I guess you could say, where they may have an abortion because they feel that it's more of a mercy killing for their child. So they have circumstances that are like that, but they said that's like half the women, so there are women who will have abortions later in their pregnancy. Some of them don't find out that they're pregnant till later. Some women, if a situation arises where maybe they got a new job, they got an elevation in their career that they already have, or they're finishing school, or got accepted to the school of their dreams, or their boyfriend left them, or their boyfriend got a bonus and now they can afford the abortion. All kinds of different reasons why people may decide to do them later. But that doesn't mean that they're all in a crisis, as she said, because again, if they were in crisis in besides like fetal abnormality or something like that, you would just induce the labor. If it was some kind of medical emergency involving them on the mother's end, you would just induce the labor because that's the fastest way to get the baby out. So this idea that it's only in crisis, that's not true. And by now, these people ought to know. But that would have been a good time to interject and push back. And he mentions Northam, which, by the way, if you're not familiar with what he's referring to, the former governor of Virginia, there was a bill that they were trying to pass where you'd be able to have abortion, like basically to the point of when a woman is crowning. And they're like, there's no limit on it. And so that was pretty crazy. And they were talking about like if a baby survives abortion, and he was talking on a radio show, and he's like, well, what you'd see what the parents want to do, and you'd make the baby comfortable. And it's like, you make him comfortable, like that's a whole human being that's no longer in the mama. You're gonna argue that's not a person now? So why not take care of them and try to help them so they live, right? So he said something that was really vile. So Trump mentions him a few times, at least twice in this interview. Now, what Trump should have done, or other Republicans can do, is just remind everybody that in January of this year, pretty sure it was January, I'm pretty sure it was this, that it had to be January this year, because it was a new Congress, that the Republicans tried to they put forth a bill to protect lives, like the one Northam was referring to, people who survive abortion, which, by the way, there's people on this planet walking around who have survived abortion attempts, that it's required to give them medical care. And these Democrats got up on the floor and acted a fool and said, yeah, Jeffries, the minority speaker got up and, you know, said crazy stuff. There was a woman from Michigan, who took Peter Meyer's seat, who was like, as a pro-choice Christian, I think about Jeremiah 1:5 when it said, I formed you in your mother's womb. Doesn't say the government's womb. I'm just like, it has nothing to do with the womb. The baby has survived the murder attempt. It got nothing to do with your womb. So why why vote this way? So if you want to talk about how radical some of the stuff is that they support, you need to just point to something that happened this year. And at one point, she's going to tell Trump, I'm sorry for the spoiler, she's going to tell him that Northam is the former governor, right? Which is true. It's still terrible that that happened not too long ago, a couple of years ago, but it's still the former. So we could talk about something that people voted for this past election, people who will be up for re-election, voted this particular way, and they are radical. It should be on Trump in this interview and other people who are running for office who are asked these questions to say, hey, this happened. I don't even think it was mentioned at the Republican debate. They had a section on abortion, and Nikki Haley was like, people don't want, can't we just say this? Can't we just say that? Can't we just say this? And it kind of sounded okay, but it's like, no, Nikki, because they're not there with you. They are very radical on this position, or basically up until the time of birth. So I mean, Trump said right there that the Democrats are radical, but he's gonna keep saying things like, not even Democrats want this, not even Democrats want that. I think he means like Democrat voters, like people at large, like in the country. He shouldn't say that. He should keep hammering on that Democrats are radical, so very radical, and just say the Americans, it's the American people don't want all the, up until, I don't think they should keep saying moment of birth, but I think, you say Americans don't want healthy women to be able to abort healthy fetuses, and they can't fact check, they can't just throw that under the rug. That's happening. Women are doing that. Maybe they could try to memory hole it or whatever, but that's happening. There's been some pretty high profile cases as of late. So he should say the American people aren't that radical, but the Democrats are. The Democrats are. The Democrats in your Congress, in the Senate, in the House and the Senate, in your local legislature. Ask them what their limitations are on it, because they probably disagree with you. And we can't reach a compromise when they want it all the way to the point where the woman is crowning, you know. And she can say, well, no one's for that. If no one does it, then why not ban it? If no one does it, why not ban it? It's like CRT, like, it's not in the schools, so let's ban it from the schools. How dare you? Is it in the schools or is it not in the schools? Is it inappropriate books in the schools or are they not in the schools? Like when we want to ban it, you're like, please don't do that. That's you're book banning. How are you book banning books that don't exist in your opinion? Anyway, let's keep watching.
After 5 months and 6 months and 7 months. And now it gave people that believe in pro-life, look, just so you understand, it's pretty much 50-50. It's a 50-50 issue. Amazing. If you look at the charts, it's been 49, 51. It's been like that for many years. Goes both ways. 51, both ways. Ready? I was able to do something which gave at least pro-life people a voice. Now it's going to work out. Now the number of months will be determined. And you're going to have something where everybody comes together.
Does it bother you, though, that women say their lives are being put at risk? Do you feel you bear any responsibility? Because as you say, you are responsible.
What's going to happen, this is an issue that's been going on for a long time, and it's a very polarizing issue. Because of what's been done and because of the fact we brought it.
Sorry, it's muted at the time. What he keeps she keeps saying like, what about these women who are at risk? That would have been a good time to keep, like we want to protect women and make sure that women are safe. Um, but what about the women in the womb who are being brutally mutilated? What about the sons in the womb who are being brutally mutilated as they're killed? He'll say ripped apart, you know, bring back some of that back to the conversation. Bring some of that back to the conversation. Don't let them just be able to make it seem like the fetus is just a piece of property, and we're not talking about at least two human beings. The goal is to maximize at least my goal is to maximize as most liberty as possible for both of these human beings that have inherent value. So that's he did that when he was debating Hillary Clinton, and she tried to humanize partial birth abortion. They'll try to like deny like that even exists now, but she defended it on the debate stage in 2016, and then he used graphic language, not extraordinary graphic language, and talked about the babies being ripped apart. And I think that was an important stark moment between where she was and not where the Democrats were on that issue, and what was the right path to be on that issue. So again, he really approaches this interview like he just wants to cut a deal and doesn't humanize the millions of people who've been killed since Roe v. Wade. And again, we have about 1 million abortions every year. You can't just go to the CDC. By the way, states aren't required to report. So if you look at CDC data, it might be missing like California. That's a pretty big one. So let's keep watching.
Back to the states. We're going to have people come together on this issue. They're going to determine the time, because nobody wants to see 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 months. Nobody wants to see abortions when you have a baby in the womb. I said with Hillary Clinton, when we had the debate, I made a statement: rip the baby out of the womb in the 9th month. You're allowed to do that, and you shouldn't be allowed to do that.
Again, no one is arguing for that. That's not a part of anyone's platform, Mr. President.
The Democrats are able to kill the baby after birth.
Let me talk to you.
Nobody wants that.
Democrats don't want that.
So
either.
we're going to come together.
I want to know what you want. I want to know what you're going to do if you're
reelected. We are going to come together.
Would you sign federal legislation that would?
So she is just. Say, nobody wants that, Mr. President, and just again, that's not true. I'm not going to harp on the legislation that happened earlier this year again, but there are very specific examples. You can name different bills. Where they've totally, and he kept bringing up Virginia governor, but there's things that this Congress has done. So she's lying, saying Democrats don't want to do this. Democrats don't want to do this. The Kamala Harris, was that last week? We talked about how went through her interview. She would not list a limitation. She just kept saying, "Well, Roe v. Wade, Roe v. Wade, Roe v. Wade." Roe v. Wade allows you to have abortions up to the moment of birth. It does. So they just don't want to answer the question because the answer is they want it available up until the moment of birth. So people need to stop allowing journalists who are trying to downplay this get away with this. They should not allow that to happen. I know he's trying a bit, but he needs to be specific. I'm glad he brought up the Hillary Clinton thing. I watched this yesterday, but I kind of forgot that he brought that up. So but it's not just that partial birth abortion time where the babies are being ripped apart. That's happening obviously throughout the whole entire pregnancy, basically.
Ban abortion at 15 weeks?
No. Let me just tell you what I do. I'm going to come together with all groups, and we're going to have something that's acceptable. Right now, to my way of thinking, the Democrats are the radicals, because after 4 and 5 and 6 months, but you have to say this, after birth. You have New York State and other places that pass legislation where you're allowed to kill the baby after birth.
Mr. President, I want to give voters who are going to be weighing in on this election a very clear sense of where you stand on
I think
this.
they're all going to like me. I think both sides are going to like me.
Let me, but let
What's
Mr.
going to
President,
have to
Mr.
happen
President,
is you're
let me
going to
just
have to
ask this question,
listen.
please.
You're asking me a question. What's going to happen is you're going to come up with a number of weeks or months. You're going to come up with a number that's going to make people happy, because 92% of the Democrats don't want to see abortion after a certain period of time.
If a federal ban landed on your desk, if you were reelected, would you sign it at 15
Are you
weeks?
talking about a complete ban?
A ban at 15 weeks?
Well, people are starting to think of 15 weeks. That seems to be a number that people are talking about right now.
Would you sign that?
I would sit down with both sides and I'd negotiate something, and we'll end up with peace on that issue for the first time in 52 years. I'm not going to say I would or I wouldn't. I mean, DeSantis is willing to sign a 5-week and 6-week ban.
Would you support that? You think that
I think what he did is a terrible thing and a terrible mistake. But we'll come up with a number. But at the same time, Democrats won't be able to go out in 6 months, 7 months, 8 months and allow an abortion. And Kristen, you have to look at this because you said no. You have some states that are allowed to kill the child after birth, and you can't allow that.
But Mr. President, again, no one is calling for a child to be killed after birth. No one's calling for that.
But you
to
have
be allowed.
legislation.
But let me just ask
Kristen, you have legislation in certain states where it's allowed.
Mr. President,
the governor of Virginia, previous governor, who was
so she's saying previous governor. So that clip where we've gotten to the point that's viral on social media right now. So which basically saying that both sides will come together, we'll negotiate, we'll have peace, that we haven't had in 50 years over this issue. And, Ron DeSantis, he did a 6-week ban, and she's like, and he said what he did was terrible. So, and that's basically the clip that is circulating around. And so, that really upset me, and it upset a lot of people for good reasons. Now, two are big, I suppose. So this idea that you can negotiate and get it to a point, he's like, both sides will be happy and we'll have peace on the issue. Trump is, trying to be the great negotiator here. I get it. And, I never expected or suspected that he was big on the pro-life policy. Not the policies are probably fine, like the ethics and the principles. I'm glad for what he did, but is he like a, I don't know, true believer? I wouldn't say so. Or never, suspected or whatever. But he's done good things that we have liked and we have enjoyed and benefited from, and I'm grateful. But he's willing to cut deals and compromise in this, whatever, if it's for general election purposes or if it's like, hey, I did the Abraham Accords, if I could do that in the Middle East, maybe I can bring together these pro-choice people and these pro-life people and the Republicans and Democrats and make this compromise, and people will say, oh, well, Trump did this and he's such a good negotiator and this will be my legacy and etc. It could be some of that, but this idea that Jeremy Boring from the Daily Wire, he said if he was president and a 6-week bill, a 15-week ban came to his table, desk or whatever, he'd be thrilled. He'd also be thrilled if a 6-week came to his desk, because you make different steps toward the right direction, but you don't throw out your principles or compromise really on your principles and stuff. So Trump saying like, we're gonna get this deal and we're gonna have peace. The goal is for human beings not to be killed. And I don't think there's just a point where you're just like, okay, well, we're good there. We're good at that point. Like, we'll kill these people, but and we've advanced to the point in society and we're just gonna throw in the towel and let that be the end of it. That's not where the pro-life movement would be satisfied with. I hope wouldn't be satisfied with. So there's that. Um, but the whole point of Roe v. Wade being overturned is so what Roe v. Wade did was that it stopped states from being able to protect life um prior to viability. I mean, originally it was prior to the like third trimester. How it was the first trimester women could do anything. Second trimester you can have limitations, but not on the behalf of the child, just limitations on abortions that benefit the mother, like procedurally or whatever. You want to make sure that I don't know, everything's sterile or something. So you can limit it in those kinds of ways where it's going to be good for the mother when she has this procedure. Um, in the third trimester, that's when you can start giving some moral consideration to the the baby, but that they don't say that you have to limit abortion at that point in time. You can limit abortion to that point in time. So that's why we had states that allow abortion basically up until the time of birth, even in a Roe world. So Roe got changed as more things popped up, like Planned Parenthood versus Casey and the Doe case. So it changed, Planned Parenthood versus Casey. I think the undue burden thing is from the Casey case, if I'm not mistaken, and that's when they started to like talk have things around viability rather than the three trimester thing. But it prevented states from saving lives. That's what it did. It didn't give some kind of maximum, which is the sort of impression that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris want to put upon Americans. So it being overturned now allows states to be able to save more lives, and it gives states more opportunities to kill more baby. I guess kill about the same ones that they were killing before, but or you know but if you're saying it needs to kick back to the states and it's not a federal issue anymore, or you could just say, or maybe you think it should be a federal issue, but Roe v. Wade was a trash opinion, and it was. Even like Ruth Bader Ginsburg knew wasn't a good decision or whatever. So they've overturned that, and now you could say 10th Amendment states need to decide or whatever, blah blah blah. Donald Trump is saying what DeSantis did was bad, was a terrible thing. So even if your argument is that, they don't need to be running for president talking about abortion and how they're going to ban abortion in 15 weeks, 6 weeks or whatever, it's going to be bad for the general election, people are so emotional about it, needs to remain a state's issue. But okay, but Trump is undermining some legislation that happened on the state level and saying what DeSantis did was terrible. So if you're the leader of the Republican Party and you're the president and you can undermine the pro-life movement like that, it's going to do damage to the movement itself, and I think also make it harder to continue passing pro-life legislation in a similar manner. So it's strategically, politically, it wasn't a good move either. um so there's some strong words from like people like Lila Rose and Kristen Hawkins, and Lila Rose is with Live Action, Kristen Hawkins is with Students for Life. And there's some other groups that made statements, but they weren't strong statements regarding what he said. Um, I'm I was triggered. But I was curious how so many people who are obviously like Trump's their guy for the primary, and the primaries are over, kind of rhetoric, how they would react to this. And I went back to Jack's page, Jack Posobiec, and he retweeted like interviews, the 10-10, and people are like, bro, aren't you like super Catholic? Like, you're not going to say anything about that section of the interview? And then Mike Cernovich just went all in on like people who were upset about this, and he had tweets like, people responding like it's anti-biblical, where he's like, it's not in, there's no abortion in the New Testament. We're like, dude, I had tweeted under that thread and just like, is murder not no longer bad in the New Testament? Is that your impression? And it like quickly got like 100 likes. Just saying all kinds of crazy things in support of Trump, and just like, Mike Pence is pro-life, but he's gonna send your kids to war. You gotta vote for Trump. Trump's the only one who can win. It's not gonna matter if somebody doesn't win. And there's people, I understand people feel like this subject is so toxic, but I'm like, but Trump, is it more toxic uh, than, talking about the election being rigged for almost 4 years, 3 years or whatever. Actually, it's any election that to go his way. I mean, people. I mentioned how the crazy pro-choice woman from Michigan replaced Peter Meyer. She didn't beat Peter Meyer. John Gibbs was Trump's candidate, and in the primary, Democrats were literally paying for support ads for Gibbs because they wanted him to be the nominee in the general, because they figured that he would be easier for their candidate to beat. So they would make ads. They wouldn't make ads like, "Oh, go vote for John Gibbs." They would say stuff like, "John Gibbs, he's for good education." Like they say something that, to any normal person watching, like, well, that sounds good. Like, he supports Trump. So if you're like a voter, you're like, "Oh, John Gibbs sounds like," because John Gibbs didn't have a lot of money and stuff. So the Democrats were like basically funding a lot of his, like, the eyeballs landing on him. And so, and people were mad at Peter Meyer, because Peter Meyer was one of the Republicans that voted for impeachment. So, he had issues, with popularity there, but yet they supported John Gibbs, and John Gibbs wasn't the only candidate that they did it with. But it was a strategy of Democrats to support pro-Trump people, the MAGA people, and watch them fall in the election. And every one that they had that plot with lost. So, I talked about this at the time when this happened, and I didn't go into the depth of that, of how I wanted it to. And I think I'm going to need to do like a special sort of video on this. But after the midterm, Trump had put some things on Truth Social about the pro-life community in Roe v. Wade, and it sounded like he was throwing him under the bus. And he mentioned people who have no exceptions, and I thought that was bonkers, because I'm like, in Michigan, he supported candidates that have basically no exceptions, or only exceptions for life with the mother. Now he believes in also having an incest and a sexual assault exception, and I'll get to that point and play that and get to why I don't why there's issues there with that. But he went that route about why we got decimated in the midterms, and took no accountability for some of his candidates. He didn't take any accountability for Herschel Walker. It was a little awkward when people are saying don't vote for Warnock because of his pro-choice positions, and then there's commercials and all the stuff about Herschel Walker, who paid for at least 2 abortions, and he denied it. But there's evidence, fairly good evidence. And then and when he denied that, his son, who didn't want him to run anyway, just went off with his dad, because he was like, he's a liar. And he's a creep, and he's like, I talk about fatherless homes because I know what it's like. I'm like, dang. So people, I heard people who door knocked in Georgia, and they're like, people didn't want to vote for Herschel Walker because they felt he was a deadbeat dad. And you could say, well, this deadbeat dad at least will vote pro-life. But okay, but people felt it more personally about him actually paying for abortion. Now, I know men who have paid for abortions and felt terribly for it, especially for the sort of emotional damage that was laid upon the woman who actually got the abortion. And they're pro-life now, but they, made this gruesome mistake. And it's not the fact that he just did it, but it's the fact that he, there's evidence and he just like blatantly kept denying it. And then there's a bunch of other things. So there's, Herschel Walker, who failed, and there was Oz, who failed. Oz, who has mocked heartbeat bills, who elevated the transgender movement stuff on a show. And there's other issues with Oz, including the fact that he was a carpetbagger as well, but that was the guy Trump wanted. And the Trump allies and stuff were willing to slander, like Kathy Barnett and all kinds of different stuff. They did. I was disappointed in how Trump handled the midterms. And in Michigan, he basically he handpicked our ticket, and just went down in flames. And those people had, no, they didn't have the exceptions that Trump had. One governor candidate out of the 5 people who were like on the ballot, only one of them had the exceptions that Trump had, and that was Kevin Reinke. And Kevin Reinke came in second, and Trump didn't endorse Reinke. He endorsed Tudor Dixon. And Tudor Dixon, she was asked an interview about exceptions for sexual assault, and people like sliced up her interview or whatever, but people took clips and were just like, she believes in no exceptions, even for they use the R word, but for sexual assault. And those if you weren't in Michigan, you don't understand how nonstop those ads were all the time. I think candidates, like, listen to me, if you know a candidate or whatever, tell them that if they are asked about this exception, in cases, what happens in the case of SA, do you really want the mother to have to carry this person's baby and stuff? They'll call it a baby when it belongs to the sexual assaulter. They won't call it a baby when when it's consensual. It's very interesting how that works. What they should say is, what you are asking, do you realize that you are asking me to discriminate against this human being? Like, let's just assume that you agree with me that this is a living human being. Like, that's not up for debate. It's a living human being, and I believe they have value. All of us have inherent value, but you are telling me that this specific person, which, by the way, they are people walking around living their lives who have raised kids themselves, you are telling me that this particular group of people don't deserve to be protected from violence. That's how they should phrase that, because don't give them the soundbite that they want so you can become the next Tudor Dixon. Break it down like that. That's how you should break it down. But anyway, the midterms didn't go well, and so Trump didn't want to take any accountability for a lot of his people who lost that he pushed, and then he kept like touting like, oh, but I got all these people elected, and he'd have like Senator Tim Scott, like, I endorsed him and he won. It's like, bro, Tim Scott didn't need your endorsement to win. These people not all these people need your endorsement. And then there's people on there who he didn't support in the primary. He switched, he switched it up, when his candidate lost or whatever. So, to me, it seemed like he needed someone else to blame. And I'm not saying that women and people feeling legitimately, they feel like a right was taken away from them and feeling the need to fight back. And there's so much crazy propaganda going on. It's no wonder why some of these people are crazy about this issue. Just to be honest, the sort of things that go around on social media and the stuff that people elevate. Again, I talk about someone believe like we need abortions because if we don't have abortions, then women who have miscarriages will die because no one will treat them. I'm like, are you crazy? That's not the same thing. But people believe that, and so. What we need is for people to break through these lies and to have the debates and to stand up for life. And him coming at the saddest thing probably about this 6-week thing, I don't know if I genuinely believe that Trump thinks a 6-week ban is bad. I don't know if I genuinely believe that he believes that. I think he said it mostly because DeSantis did it. I think he's just that petty. I think it's just that simple. He didn't call out some other, I mean, he's running against DeSantis. He doesn't like DeSantis. He's mad that DeSantis is running. He calls him disloyal and all that other kind of stuff. And people see him as the number two, the other person, besides him. And so he's been attacking him nonstop. So saying I think what he did is terrible. I I would like to think that he really doesn't think a 6 week is terrible. I would like to really think that, but it's gross that he's will that if it's the case that he just said it because he doesn't like DeSantis and he wanted to like be like, oh, this was bad politically, or oh, what he did was terrible, or he didn't give women enough time, or oh, whatever the logic is, or is supposed to be. I don't think that the logic is there other than he wanted to one up DeSantis and just trash him. I think it's really could be that simple, but um we that doesn't mean that we should just kind of give him the pass on that though. And so I'm going to read some things about this is an article about the 6 week Senate. I mean, the bill that he signed. Florida's 6 week abortion limit will have a few exceptions. The bill allows this is when it passed the Senate, and Florida's 6 week ban limit will have a few exceptions. The bill allows legal abortion up to 15 weeks um of pregnancy if the pregnancy is the result of an act of sexual assault, incest, or human trafficking. So you still get up to 15 if it's because now that they're pregnant at 6 weeks or whatever. So in the case of, you've been human trafficked or whatever, allows up to 15 weeks. And a lot of people are, good with 15 weeks. That's like the plurality of the nation don't want it past 15 weeks. Um, there's a lot of people who want it, of course, at 6 weeks or no exceptions besides like life with the mother and other stuff like that. But most people really, really don't want it past 15 weeks. Majority of Americans. So they still allow 15 weeks for those instances. Um, in the case of fatal fetal abnormality, it allows abortion until the start of the third trimester of pregnancy. So if you're doing a test and you're somewhere like in, the second trimester and you see that your baby is not compatible with life, or I would assume the abnormality even goes with maybe some other more severe circumstances. So this is to me this is a pretty big allowance as well. Um if you're getting to the third trimester, that's really, really late. And so allowing it up until the point of the third trimester for fetal abnormality, that's a pretty generous exception, I think. The 6 week bill maintains the existing exception of Florida abortion law for cases in which the life of the physical health of the mother is at risk. So allows health of the mother, like every single pro-life law in this country, similar to the provisions of the 15-week limit that has been in effect in Florida since the summer of 2022. The 6 week bill states that a physician may not knowingly perform an abortion later than 6 weeks of pregnancy unless it is necessary to save the life of the mother or avert a serious risk of substantial and irreversible physical impairment of a major bodily function of the pregnant woman psychological other than a psychological condition. So like if there's some kind of issue where the pregnancy will cause some kind of major serious risk or physical impairment in the body, um you can still get an abortion exception there. So that's a pretty, there's other states that have those exceptions too, but just, you know this is covering a lot of bases here. In order to invoke the life or physical health exception, the bill requires two physicians to certify in their reasonable medical judgment that the abortion is necessary. But a second physician's certification is not required in an emergency. So if there's an emergency and you need to do something and the doctor's like, oh, we got to induce or abort or whatever, just within your good medical judgment. So in reality, that bill, unless you really want abortion to be available for like birth control type reasons, why would you have a problem with something like that? With those exceptions, if there was a national ban that was like this heartbeat bill, that if pro-choice people were willing to get on that, pro-life people would be happy to at least incrementally get there. But there wouldn't be a lot that pro-life people could really say to even like get that knocked down, because it because it is such a good compromise on other things, I think, for at least for what a lot of people claim that they need the compromises for. Because if you're going to say that women don't abort for reasons later in pregnancy unless it's some kind of medical emergency, it has exceptions for that. But we do know that women do abort later for non-medical reasons, and they just don't want to admit that. But if it doesn't happen, then why can't we ban it? I think that's a pretty generous law. I think that's a pretty generous compromise. I do. But Trump says it's not a good thing. Trump says it's not a good thing. And then you have people like Cernovich again, who was just trying to like defend Trump or come at the people who were coming at Trump, who's just like, well, you're really not you guys are It's trying to imply that everybody's a hypocrite unless they're like no exceptions whatsoever, or you're not pro-life. Or he's like, how pro-life are you? Are you still paying your taxes? Your taxes are used, the DOD for military abortions and stuff. So are you really pro-life if you're paying your taxes? That's how like crazy it got in people trying to defend Trump on this particular issue. I'm gonna go ahead and let the rest of this conversation play out.
Whack job. I call him the Michael Jackson governor.
No one's talking about that
governor,
as part of their platform. I want to know what
that governor said you can kill the baby after birth.
But Mr. President, this is about what you would do if you were reelected. As you know, you upset.
We will agree to a number of weeks, which will be where both sides will be happy. We have to bring the country together on this issue.
Mr. President, when you talk about negotiating, I think a lot of people think to themselves, this is an issue that they care about deeply in their hearts. They know where they stand, and they want to know where you stand. As you know, some anti-abortion groups are really looking for some clarity from you. So let me just ask you to put a fine point on this. Should the federal government impose any abortion restrictions, or should it be completely left up to the states?
No, I don't think you should be allowed to have abortions well into a pregnancy.
But what about the question I just asked you?
No, we're going to agree to a number of weeks or months or however you want to define it. And both sides are going to come together, and both sides, and this is a big statement, both sides will come together, and for the first time in 52 years, you'll have an issue that we can put behind us.
At the federal level?
It could be state or it could be federal. I don't frankly care.
So you're not committed to a ban at the federal level?
I will say this, everybody, including the great legal scholars, love the idea of Roe v. Wade terminated so it be brought back to the states.
It sounds like that's what you think too, that it should remain a state issue.
I would say this, from a pure standpoint, from a legal standpoint, I think it's probably better, but I can live with it either way. It's much more important. The number of weeks is much more important. But something will happen with the number of weeks, the amount of time after which you can't do it. And you know what? The most powerful people that are anti-abortion are okay with that now. And you know what? They weren't okay with that even a year ago.
Your former Vice President, Mike Pence, believes that a fetus should have constitutional rights. Do you believe that, Mr. President?
Mike Pence said something about 15 weeks, too, which was a big change for Mike Pence because Mike Pence had no exceptions. I have exceptions, by the way. I think people should have exceptions. I think if it's rape or incest or the life of the mother, I think you have to have exceptions.
Does a fetus have constitutional rights, Mr.
And a lot of people, when they don't have exceptions. Now, I will tell you that I think most people, most Republicans are willing. You go life of the mother, rape, incest. I think most of them are there.
But should a fetus have constitutional rights, Mr. President?
Well, I don't know what he's saying, because before he wanted, you couldn't have abortion.
But what are you saying?
Now all of a sudden, excuse me. Now all of a sudden he's saying 15 weeks. I said, wow, where did that come from? That's a radical change. Look, something is going to happen that's going to be good for everybody. And that's what I'm almost like a mediator in this case. They wanted Roe v. Wade terminated because it was inappropriate. We got it done. Something's going to happen. It's going to be a number of weeks. Something's going to happen where both sides are going to be able to come together. And then we'll be able to go into other things like the economy, our military.
Are you saying a federal ban with exceptions? Is that what you're saying?
What I say is very simple, because you can't put words in my mouth like that.
I
Because
just
you've been
wanna
hearing me talk
understand.
about this issue, and
Yeah.
I think talk about it very productively. It could be a state ban. It could be a federal ban. But Democrats want that too. Democrats don't want to see abortion in the 7th month. Okay, I speak to a lot of Democrats. They want a number. There is a number, and there's a number that's going to be agreed to. And Republicans should go out and say the following, because I think the Republicans speak very inarticulately about this subject. I watched some of them without the exceptions, et cetera, et cetera. I said, other than certain parts of the country, you're not going to win on this issue, but you will win on this issue when you come up with the right number of weeks, because Democrats don't want to be radical on the issue. Most of them, some do. They don't want to be radical on the issue. They don't want to kill a baby in the 7th month or the 9th month or after birth. And they're allowed to do that, and you can't do that.
So, well, let me see if that's the end of the conversation.
I have a very robust foreign policy section to get to.
Okay.
I do want to give you an opportunity.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's the end of it there. So, I thought when he said that some people don't speak very articulately about this matter, that was very interesting. Not because he's not wrong. He's not wrong. There's a lot of politicians who say that, certain talking points, and they kind of don't know where to go with it other than that. They certainly probably couldn't win many TikTok debates, probably even, and don't really understand. They know what they should say, but they don't understand all the ethics that are kind of driving it, and definitely don't know how to say things in a particularly persuasive manner as well. So I agree with Trump that a lot of people don't know how to really talk about the issues articulately. But the thing about Trump though here is that if he was not talking to her, if he was having on, Destiny, the Twitch streamer, if he was having a conversation with Destiny, and Trump is like, these other people, they're crazy, they're radical, they want no exceptions at all. And I believe in having an exception for, if a woman is sexually assaulted, and Destiny's like, wait a minute, he'll say, that doesn't make any sense. And I know he would say that because I've seen him have people on who are pro-life who said the same exceptions as Trump. And he's like, that doesn't make any sense. It's a baby, right? Abortion kills a baby. You talked about babies being ripped apart. That's a bad thing, right? Babies being ripped apart. Yeah, it's a bad thing. Okay, then why is it okay to rip apart this baby? So I understand the emotional appeal of Republicans surrendering that exception, but there's a lot of pro-choice people who are pretty savvy, or getting more savvy. So some of them are really dumb and just have like it's a parasite. It's they'll say stuff like that. But there's other people who have started to notice, like, if you say it's a baby and it's wrong to kill a baby, and they all have inherent value, why is this child any different? Why is this child any different? The child's not different. The circumstance of how the child came into the world is different. But the child's not different. So are you going to advocate for that child's right or not? And I don't know how that conversation would go, other than Trump all of a sudden sounding like a pro-choice person and Destiny sounding like a pro-life person as he challenged him. So if you are a Republican, and again, if you're running for office, or if you know a Republican candidate running for office, and they take Trump's advice and they stick with those exceptions, and they do it to, you got to have that, because he's saying politically he's saying you can't win if you have those positions. You can't win if you have those positions. And I get it, and I understand that that is the easier route to go. But if he ever gets into the circumstance, the situation where someone pushes back and says, Mr. President, do you not think they're human and alive? And why are you okay with killing this person? Who will suffer to no fault of their own for a crime they did not commit. So if someone asks him that question, I kind of want to see someone ask him, because I can imagine how it goes. But Trump is hard to kind of put in a box, so you don't know for sure what he'll say. But I just would imagine he wouldn't have the best answer. And a lot of people wouldn't have the best answer. It was Jedediah Bila, who I first saw was on with Destiny talking about it, and Destiny's like, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any sense. And she would just say, well, that's tough. It's tough. I know it's tough. And it is tough. It is tough. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why I think a lot of pro-lifers, when I see them debate and stuff, they'll, they don't really want to talk about it. They're like, well, I don't want to debate the rare case. And I guess that's fair, because most people, when they want to debate the issue, it's not because they're okay with every other abortion, but they just want to use this particular one to justify the rest. And I don't I think I'm gonna just go back to doing some more debates and stuff on TikTok and stuff, having conversations with. I don't know if debate is a good term, but have conversations where I state my opinion, they state their opinion, and we'll just try to talk about it. But not a I owned you kind of feel. That's not really my goal. But I don't think it would be worthwhile, the conversation with some people, if they don't agree that it's a life being harmed and being killed. Then there's nothing that you can say that will get to someone to the point of accepting that it's moral to have that baby, if you don't think it's a baby, if you think it's a clump of cells or parasite or whatever. And I don't know what you can say. But if someone is at that level and they just don't know how to get there, there are ways to have that conversation and to talk about why it's still the wrong decision. And there's 5 particular questions that I asked, that I did cover them in my book. I took a lot of time to talk about particular exceptions in my book. Of course, God is blatantly against abortion, because I do, it is a topic that people should be able to talk about and articulate. But it's been one that's like, people just have kind of skirted around it, because it is so difficult for people to talk about. And I'm not gonna go through it all today, because it's a long conversation. But I don't know how. I'm just warning pro-life people that if that is your exception, there's some inconsistency there. Now, I've seen some good people debate that, and they're just like, it's not going to undo what happened. Like, why you want to punish the baby? They just put that simply, and then and go from there. But there's a lot of sort of ethical ways you could really make the argument. I want to read this. I got a super chat. I want to read that before I move on. I don't disagree with any of your comments, but the primaries don't produce a Christian-centered candidate. How do we vote? Thank you so much, T, for your question. I think you should vote for the best person in that circumstance. I mean, there's people who take a very hard stance of, I will only vote for people who are worthy of my vote. And I get that. I respect that. At the end of the day, someone is going to win. And so you want the best person who's going to win, who will enact things that you believe are the best policies, and will do the, impact the best change, and or at least that we can endure. You know, my sister lived in Detroit for a little while, and so she, Republicans weren't winning out there, so she tried to vote for a Democrat who she found was less crazy. I don't. I'm represent. I live in a blue city, in a district that was in a county that was red but has been blue past couple elections. My representation is going to be blue. I would I I would really hope. I still vote red and stuff. Don't get me wrong. Even though it's not likely that they will succeed, but I wish that I wish that the representatives around me weren't so radical, because at the end of the day they're going to be the ones who are representing me. So you just can't. You have to make whatever you feel is the best decision going forward for the country. I'm not going to harp on people who really feel like they're doing a protest vote and they're not going to vote for either candidate if they don't like them, or any of the candidates if they don't like them, or whatever. I guess I'll try to persuade you otherwise. um a lot of people, especially in 2016, a lot of people don't know this. I'm not ashamed of this or anything, but like in 2016, Trump was not my person that I voted for in the primary. I didn't like a lot of the stuff that he was saying. I had questions about how serious he was. I still to this day maintain that if Apprentice wasn't canceled, that he would have never been the president. And I'm a huge fan of Apprentice, and and really liked a lot of stuff about Trump. But I didn't. While a lot of people might have found like his answers to questions charming and hilarious, I was like, okay, if you were taking this a bit more serious about wanting to be the president, I think you'd have a better answer here. I think you'd have a better answer here. I think you'd have a better answer here. And I voted. So by the time the Michigan primaries came along, the only people on the ballot were Kasich, and Kasich was like my least favorite person. Uh, and he just really rubbed me the wrong way during the first debate. And I'm like, why are you staying in so long? Um, Maybe it was because he wanted to win Ohio. He did. Did he win Ohio? He was the governor of Ohio. So Kasich was on the ballot. Trump and Ted Cruz. I think it was only the three of them at the time. So I voted for Ted Cruz in the primary. And when it came to the election, the general, like I was like totally like devoted to seeing the Republican outcome. And um, there are people who were questioning like the Hollywood Access tape and other kind of stuff that happened. And people are like, oh, how could Christians vote for this man? And he's done this, and he's been divorced these three times, and he's divorced twice, has a third wife, and he's done this, etc. Blah blah blah. And I would say you guys are trying to punk me out of voting for this man when I know you guys wanted him to be the nominee. You guys wanted him to be the that was literally Hillary Clinton's plan, which was like revealed through WikiLeaks and Podesta emails and stuff, that she was relying on Hillary Clinton on Trump being the nominee, and they thought he would lose. They thought that was her plan. Trump be the nominee and then Trump lose. That was the plan, because it certainly wasn't going to Wisconsin. So or giving them adequate money, or even inserting data. They weren't even inserting data in some places, really. They just thought they had it so in the bag. It was crazy. So they got I would think that if you were concerned about the country, that you would want the best people on both sides to get the nomination. I know some people are like, "Oh, let's get the worst person and then we'll beat that worst person." You never know what's going to happen. That's a risky game to play. I would like the best person on both sides to win, because even though I'm going to support my guy, if my guy loses, I don't want to feel like the country's going to be destroyed. But they've thought that Trump was the worst and the biggest joke, et cetera, blah blah blah. But he's the guy who they wanted to be the nominee, because they wanted to. They had all this friendly press towards him. He was on Morning Joe all the time, nonstop, and then um you know he got the nomination, Hollywood Access tape, all this stuff. Beauty Queen said he was, said that he said she was fat or something. They had all the stuff that they had before, but they unleashed, of course, when he was a nominee, and suddenly these people weren't so friendly toward him or whatever. So, and that was always the plan. People were like, Republicans were like, they're gonna like turn on him, obviously, but Trump was just able to withstand the mud monster. And I'm like, okay, Trump is a gamble. At least in my mind, I'm like, Trump is a gamble. Sure, he's a risk. But Hillary Clinton over here is a guaranteed evil. So I'm like, I'm not going to support a person who I know literally said on The View that the unborn don't have rights moments, like hours. She said hours before their due date. Hours. You could probably still find that clip around. She said that on national television. That's the person. But besides her, a lot of different policy things that she wanted to enact that I didn't agree with, there's some things that I find detestable and pretty evil. And she's the Supreme Court was up for grabs. So there was a lot at stake. There was a lot at stake. So Trump was worth the risk. And it paid off, I think, because and something I knew about Trump's nature is that he wanted, to be known as a good president. He wanted that sort of bragging rights. He wanted to make some good deals. He people knew that he wasn't all. I mean, when he said like 2 Corinthians, when he's like saying, a Bible scripture or whatever, and like we don't say it like that. We say 2 Corinthians. Like, so that kind of tells you where he's at. But I had heard for years since I was a little girl about his, him knowing Paula White and other stuff like that. So I knew he had some association and a bit of reverence for the church, though he's not always well behaved himself. But he went to pastors very early on, was like, I want to basically kept saying, I want to make a deal with you guys and do this, etc. Blah, blah, blah. So again, risk, you don't know how things are going to turn out. But you knew that a sure thing with Hillary Clinton. So it was worth the gamble. So you may not get everything that you want. And in politics, you should support the person who you like, who you agree with the most, who can win, Some people who maybe have the most, maybe you're a bit of a radical on the right, and that person who has all those same stances as you aren't necessarily going to get through the general election. And and some people will be like, nope, I'm voting for my principles or whatever, I'm going to pick this person. There's a lot of things that go into politics, and in deciding who should be the nominee and whatever. But I'm sorry if I'm rambling a bit. I just wanted to answer your question thoroughly. But you might not get that Christian candidate that you really want, and that pressure to have a Christian candidate that you want will cause a lot of people to lie and deceive you when they're really not Christian, or maybe don't even really support the values that you support. Maybe they're a progressive Christian and they won't let you know to the last minute. So the most important thing is to see what kind of policies that they're going to enact. And just because someone isn't a Christian doesn't mean they're not going to, make good policy and still, be act like they have some sense, So, you know, you just gotta make what you think is the best decision for the country. And if you feel so strongly that someone doesn't earn your vote and you don't want to vote, um, you know, I guess I get it. I guess I get it. Uh, Make Trump the rep. You think Trump the Dems rigged the 2016 election to make Trump the nominee? I don't think I think rigged is a strong word, or word that gets thrown around a lot. I think it's pretty obvious that he got a lot of free media that other candidates didn't get, which he didn't really need because he already had high name ID. And people spend so much money on elections because they're trying to get, it's not just getting their message out there, it's trying to raise their name ID. Um, because you're not going to vote for someone you don't know unless you really hate the other person. Like if you go to like a lot of people like local races like school board or something like that, or county commissioner or whatever, they haven't done research or something, but they saw a yard sign and they're like, that person sounds familiar. you know that's not a good way to go through life, but knowing someone or something seeming so familiar, whatever, people vote for who they know, right? Um so many people were already accustomed to Trump, like Trump, saw his brand as being successful, being a deal maker. He's an outsider. He's been saying a lot of the same stuff politically for years about war and America not getting ripped off. And he spoke to the heart of things that a lot of people really appreciated. But my concern now is that he's Trump, like many other Republicans, um, like including Mitt Romney and stuff, it feels like they still want to be liked despite all the negativity or whatever that will come their way and all the things that the left has done to Trump and is doing now to Trump. He still wants to be liked. He leaks a lot of him and his team leak a lot of stuff to the press and whatever, and they're cozy. Like he's on tape about the classified documents, knowing that he was taped, but he gets comfortable. All you got to do is really compliment him a little bit. You butter his ego, and he just drops his guard down, and it's crazy. So, um, there's things that he did or didn't do during COVID pandemic and stuff because of how the press would react. Like, when Georgia was opening up, he's like, they're going to ream me in the press or whatever. So Trump decided to ream Kemp instead. And Kemp was like, well, I can't look like a punk and just go back because Trump is going to ream me, and I need to like help my state. So he just took the abuse from Trump and opened up Georgia. So, and he wouldn't get rid of Fauci because of how people would have responded to Fauci. So he just kept elevating him and kept bragging about how they're getting along, how he's listening to Fauci and other stuff. So, he still cares. I understand you want. I understand the optics of the press, the media, and other stuff like that, and that's important, especially when you're running for re-election and other stuff like that. I get that there's a whole political thought process behind it, but he seems to be kind of it seems like it's too much of a love-hate relationship between the media and Trump and stuff, and he likes to punch him in the face, but he likes when they show him attention. It's so he's willing now at this point with the abortion issue to make a deal with um Democrats. And I'm sorry this is such a long episode, but because we're going in the second hour, so I'm going to try to wrap this up. The if he said I will sign a 15-week limit, like that's a maximum like federally that they will allow. Democrats wouldn't agree to that because they are radical in the position. And unless you could convince their constituents to be like, no, that's a good compromise. I don't even know if they really do it. There'd have to be a lot for them to lose. Like there'd have to be such a tide shift, but there has to be such a big educational movement throughout the country to get people to mentally accept that and really pressure their representatives to be like, no, you should take a 15-week that makes sense. But it would be a 50. The only thing that would make sense from the pro-life perspective is if it's a federal maximum at 15 weeks. If it's a 15-week allowance and then maximum, which would mean which if it suddenly like tried to override state laws, that would be crazy. Because then you get rid of like 6-week bills. And by the way, Florida's not the only one with a heartbeat bill. They have one in Ohio and Georgia and Texas and other places as well, other states as well. So it's not just DeSantis he was hitting there. So you don't want to wipe out those good pieces of legislation that have been passed. So I don't see Democrats coming together and being like, yeah, we'll accept a 15-week maximum. Unless, it's so broad as far as the exceptions, like health of the mother is so broad that it really is easy for anyone after 15 weeks to go still get an abortion to the point where the law is meaningless. I just don't think Trump being like, I'm the one, I'll get us there, like that's pretty naive, I think. I think. Especially, which he didn't mention in the entire interview, earlier this year they were voting to deny babies who have survived, exited the vajayjay, who survived abortion to get to mandate that they get medical care. That's where they are. The people he'd be dealing with. They're not going to compromise on the 15-week. And you know what, Lindsey Graham tried to say, hey, 15-week, that if you were being operated on in the womb and they give you anesthesia or whatever, he was saying all that kind of stuff. So I'm not well versed, I guess, in fetal surgery. He's like, if that's the point where they're concerned about a baby feeling pain, I think that's the point where we should go ahead and protect them there, right? So Democrats are like, how dare he try to do a national ban, you know? So I doubt Trump can make a meaningful federal pro-life legislation, especially without winning some significant seats in the House and the Senate. And if he's still going on about 2020, I don't know how that's going to happen either. So I know I probably didn't come off super fiery, but as I said, I'm pretty upset about Trump's comments about the heartbeat bills and DeSantis and saying what he did was terrible. Again, it's not just Florida who has a heartbeat bill, and I went through you with the particulars of it. It has some pretty big exceptions. So federally, I don't know. Again, unless you just believe that a woman should be able to use abortion as like a birth control, uh, why would you be against the bill that they signed in Florida? Seriously. And you know, the pro-life goal would be ultimately to, to continue preserving life after that, but even then if they that was a federal law, I think it gets kind of difficult for the pro-life movement to even keep pushing it forward from there. Cuz I think that's already a pretty good compromise. Gosh, last thing I want to mention, I'm so sorry I said it would close out. I think limiting by weeks is so stupid. And I'm not gonna apologize for being blunt. I genuinely feel the gestational week like limitation thing is so dumb that it doesn't make any sort of sense. Like if you say that a woman should be able to, it's her right, she should be able to have an abortion up until like 15 weeks. Let's say that I don't know, she's just a serial whore and she is literally just using it like birth control and she just has 9, 10, 15 abortion, I don't know, she can keep doing that just because it's below 15 weeks, 14 weeks and I don't know 5 days. um but let's say there's a woman at 15 weeks and 1 day and I don't know, her house burned down, her boyfriend left her, and she has no money. She um is just in the worst situations. And I don't think this is a justifiable reason for someone to have an abortion. But this woman, because she's at 15 weeks in 1 day, it it doesn't make sense for her to have an abortion, but it makes sense for, you know, Sally, you know, to go and have multiple ones because she's using it as birth control. It doesn't make sense to me. Or you can say, or it doesn't have to be like someone just using it as a serial abort or whatever. Let's say you think it's justified for a woman to be able to have an abortion because, um, I don't know, let's say she has an abusive partner and she's terrified out of her mind and she doesn't want her child to grow up in a world where they will be terrorized too. That this is a real situation that some women face. Now I don't think women should um it we should find a way to help these women, not make keep her in that kind of situation and then make her feel that she's coerced into needing to do this abortion. We should find a way to help these women out of these domestic abusive situations. But if she gets an abortion at 9 weeks and you're like, "Oh, that totally makes sense." You're going to say it doesn't make sense for her to do that at 15 weeks in one day. It's just it's somehow just crazy at that point. It reasons make more sense to me than weeks because it's the same baby. It's the same baby. Like people were so upset about in the UK, them aborting a baby at like 32, between 32 and like 34 weeks or something like that. Or the girl in Nebraska who aborted her baby at 29 weeks and 5 days. People are like, oh, that's awful. That's too late. That's a real baby. That's a legit baby. They killed that baby. I'm like, it was still a baby at 21 weeks. It was still a baby at 15 weeks. It was the same person who you were mourning and outraged about who was killed. It's the same baby. Weeks earlier. It was the same baby that you're upset about. But it would have been fine like a couple weeks ago. To I can't wrap my mind around someone wrapping something else around their mind to get to them the point. It just doesn't compute. It doesn't compute. So him be like, we're gonna all pick a week. That sounds bonkers to me. And I don't think he'd be able to make a good argument if he's pressed in that kind of way too. I mean, the justification, so people be like, well, that's the consideration for the baby at that point in time of 15 weeks. But um it's the same baby. Once you're like, it's the same baby. It's the same baby. You're just trying to find a point of time to which it's morally acceptable to you that it won't weigh on your conscience so much. Like, oh well, it looks a little less human, so at that point, but it's still human. It's still the same baby. Anyway, I gotta go. We've been talking for 2 hours now. We've been talking. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me and being with me all this time. I hope you guys enjoyed the rant. I just had a lot of thoughts about this topic and didn't come out nearly as in um I don't know, upset, I guess, as I really felt as it was happening. It's not a live reaction of I've had I guess a day or two to process, but not a fan of how Trump handled this or at all. You'll probably see a strongly worded article that is much more intense than this video. But please go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, different articles, different videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com/donate. Cost to stream, it costs to run my website. And again, my webcam pooped out on me last week. And so I'm just using the one straight off of my camera, but the other one I had was obviously better. So that's another need that I need to get. So if you're willing to help out with that, I thank you guys so much. Please consider picking up some of my merchandise and stuff that's available on the website, and different shirts, different mugs, and all that kinds of stuff. And you guys can pick out my book. Of course, God is blatantly against abortion. I reference it. I didn't show any merchandise today. I just think I jumped right into it. But it's available on Amazon. It's also available on Barnes and Noble. So thank you so much. And I'm gonna see you guys tomorrow. Hopefully with some, I don't know, happier news or stuff, less drama. Hopefully, we'll see.